What if the one thing that could save a kingdom was a simple child's innocent words? A child, a servant's daughter, wandered into the grand hall of an immortal king. She had no place there, no business among the blood nobles and powerful lords who filled the space with laughter and clinking goblets. But when her small hand reached out to touch the mark on the Wolf King's palm, the ancient crimson mark no mortal should know, everything stopped. Looking up at the terrifying, immortal ruler, she spoke the words that sent chills through the throne room. "Sir, my mom has a mark just like yours." If you want to see how Elara's journey unfolds, don't forget to hit subscribe and comment below. Let us know what city you're watching from. The room fell dead silent. The nobles paused mid-whisper. The guards halted mid-step. And Kael Dorian, the last of the bloodline, stared down at the maid's daughter as though she had summoned the forgotten past from its deepest grave. What happened next would shatter everything, unraveling a kingdom built on secrets and buried truths. The full moon hung high and cold above the Veldrin castle, casting its silver glow over the stone walls and the great courtyard. Inside, the royal banquet was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the halls as nobles, courtiers, and soldiers all gathered to celebrate the latest conquest of their immortal king. But none of them noticed the small, unnoticed child who slipped through the shadows. Her name was Elara, and she had spent her life in the unseen spaces of the castle, moving through its halls unnoticed by the very people who ruled the land. The daughter of a humble servant, she was never meant to be in the presence of such power. Her mother, Evelyn, worked tirelessly in the kitchens, tending to the needs of the royal family, while Elara was left to play in the silent corners of the castle. She had learned to remain invisible, but tonight, curiosity led her to the grand hall, where the light of candles and chandeliers flickered like dying stars in the vast, vaulted room. As she ventured closer to the throne room, the sound of the nobles' laughter and the clink of crystal goblets grew louder. She hesitated, peeking through the open doors of the chamber, and there he sat, the Wolf King, Kael Dorian. Seated on his obsidian throne, the weight of centuries pressing upon his shoulders. But it was not Kael himself that drew her gaze. It was the glowing mark on his palm, pulsing like a heartbeat, glowing crimson in the dim light. It was a mark she had seen before, on her mother's arm, glowing faintly when she slept, a mark that Elara never understood. Without thinking, Elara slipped into the chamber. The guards were too preoccupied with the nobles to notice the small child who slipped between them, her gray dress blending into the shadows. She moved swiftly and silently, the click of her worn shoes muffled against the marble floor. When she reached the throne, Elara reached up and touched the glowing mark on Kael's hand, her fingers brushing against the warm skin. For a moment, the air around them seemed to hold its breath. The mark pulsed, the chamber seemed to shift, and everything stilled. "Sir," Elara said, her voice small but clear in the stunned silence, "my mom has a mark just like yours." The room froze. The guards stopped in their tracks. The nobles ceased their hushed whispers, staring in disbelief. Kael Dorian, the immortal king, looked down at the child, his red eyes flickering with something unexpected, fear, recognition, and something deeper. He stepped back, as if he had been struck by a force he couldn't understand. The chamber erupted in chaos. Guards drew swords, nobles began murmuring frantically, but Kael remained still, his gaze fixed on the child before him. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous, but there was something in it, a trembling edge, a flicker of something ancient and untold. Elara looked up at him, her face filled with confusion. "My mom," she repeated softly. "She has a mark just like that one on her arm. It glows sometimes when she has bad dreams." The silence in the chamber was suffocating, broken only by the soft murmur of gasps. Kael's mind reeled, trying to piece together the impossible. He had thought her bloodline lost forever, buried beneath centuries of secrecy. But the child standing before him, the maid's daughter, was connected to that very bloodline. Before anyone could react, Kael spoke, his voice urgent. "Bring me Evelyn Hayes now." Kael's command rang out across the throne room, and in that moment, the walls of Veldrin Castle seemed to tremble. The ancient blood moon seal on Kael's palm pulsed brighter, and the very foundation of the castle seemed to respond, as if something buried deep within its walls had just awakened. As the guards rushed to find Evelyn, the air in the room thickened with tension. Elara, unaware of the true significance of what she had just revealed, stood frozen, her small hand still resting gently on Kael's glowing mark. Who was her mother, really? Why did she carry the same mark as Kael? And why had she never told Elara the truth? The mystery of Elara's heritage, the curse that had bound the Wolf King for centuries, and the ancient secrets of the Blood Moon line were all about to be unraveled in a way none of them could have anticipated. As the door slammed open and two guards rushed off to find Evelyn, Elara's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had only touched the mark because it felt familiar, something she had seen her mother wear for as long as she could remember. She didn't know what it meant, not really. But Kael, the king, did. And his expression, filled with a mixture of recognition and something darker, told her that her mother's past was far more complicated than she ever imagined. As Kael turned his gaze back to Elara, his mind flashing back to a time long buried, something ancient stirred within him. For the first time in centuries, he would have to confront the truth about Evelyn, the woman who had disappeared from his life, and the daughter he never knew existed. And for Elara, the truth of her mother's legacy was about to unfold, revealing a destiny that would alter both the mortal and immortal realms forever. Elara's mind raced as she stood in the center of the throne room, her small hand still resting lightly on Kael's glowing blood moon seal. The room had fallen silent. Every noble, every guard, every shadow seemed to hold its breath. The realization that her mother's mark was somehow tied to this immortal king, this Wolf King, shattered everything she had ever known. She had no idea what had just happened, no understanding of why Kael seemed so transfixed by her innocent comment. But she could feel it in the air, the weight of ancient power gathering around them both, the heavy pulse of secrets begging to be revealed. The crimson light from Kael's mark began to fade, but the tension in the air only thickened. His ember eyes, so filled with ancient sorrow moments ago, were now locked on her with an intensity that made Elara's chest tighten. The energy in the room was electric, as though the very stones of the castle had begun to vibrate with the force of the revelation she had unwittingly triggered. For a long moment, Kael said nothing. His gaze dropped to her small hand still resting on his palm, as if he were trying to comprehend the impossible. Then, slowly, with a deep, almost reluctant sigh, he pulled his hand away from hers. "You must tell me more," Kael said, his voice low and urgent, like a command, though his tone softened in the presence of the girl before him. He motioned for her to sit, the regal, distant king now replaced by something far more vulnerable. Elara hesitated. She didn't know what to say. Her mind was still reeling from the gravity of the situation. She'd only spoken what she knew to be true. Her mother had always carried the mark, but it had never seemed important before. It was just something she had seen her mother wear, faint and glowing when her mother had troubled dreams. I don't understand," Elara finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "My mom has always had this mark. It glows sometimes when she has bad dreams." She looked up at Kael, who stood there, his posture now stiff and rigid again. "She's always kept it hidden. She doesn't speak of it much. I didn't think it was important." Kael's eyes softened slightly as Elara spoke, but they quickly darkened again, the weight of centuries of burden pressing down on him. He turned his back to her and moved slowly to the edge of the room, his fingers brushing over the wall as if seeking strength from the ancient stones of the castle. Elara couldn't help but feel a strange pang of sympathy for him, even as her own confusion grew. Finally, Kael spoke, his voice low, thick with the weight of a truth he hadn't wished to share. "You are part of something far greater than either of us can understand, Elara," he said, his back still turned to her. "The blood moon mark. It's not just a symbol. It's a curse." Elara's heart skipped a beat. "A curse?" "Your mother's mark," Kael continued, "is a mark of the bloodline, one that was thought to be lost to history. It's not something that just appears on any person. It's tied to a pact made long ago, a pact that has haunted my family for centuries." He turned around then, his gaze now locked on her, and Elara could see the deep, unspoken pain in his eyes. It was like looking at a man who had lived 1,000 lifetimes, each one marked by the same torment, the same inevitable fate. "My bloodline, Elara, is cursed," Kael said softly, stepping closer to her. "Every full moon, I transform. I become a creature of darkness, a wolf so powerful and wild that I can't control it. My mind becomes lost in the beast, and I cannot escape it. The curse binds me to it, and it is this very curse that has kept me alive for centuries." Elara's breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. The immortal king, the ruler of the land, cursed to become a monster every month? It seemed impossible. She had never heard anything like it before, and yet something in the way Kael spoke, the haunted look in his eyes, told her that this was no ordinary tale. "The blood moon seal," Kael continued, "is not something that can be copied or stolen. It's a mark of power, one that only those with the blood of the first king can bear. I am the last of my bloodline, or so I believed. Until tonight." Elara's heart hammered in her chest. She stared at him, her mind struggling to keep up with the enormity of what he was saying. "What do you mean, until tonight?" "Your mother," Kael said, his voice thick with the weight of old grief, "was once a part of my life. She carried the same mark. I believed it had been lost to time, erased by the rebellion, forgotten along with the rest of my family." He paused, his jaw clenched tight as if the words were difficult to say. "But now, I see that I was wrong. She has been alive all this time, hiding in plain sight. And you, Elara, you are the key to everything." Elara blinked, her thoughts spinning. "My mom, what are you saying?" "I should have known," Kael muttered, almost to himself. "I should have seen the signs sooner. The mark, the way you reacted to it, it all makes sense now. Your mother, she was part of the royal bloodline. She was meant to be by my side, as my queen. We had a bond, a connection that ran deeper than blood. But the rebellion tore us apart, and she—" He stopped, his voice faltering as though the memories were too painful to continue. "She disappeared, vanished as if she never existed." Elara took a step forward, feeling a strange warmth in her chest despite the coldness of the truth unfolding before her. "But my mom has never told me anything about this. She never mentioned you. She never spoke of the bloodline or the curse." "I never wanted her to know the truth," Kael replied, his voice bitter with regret. "I made a promise to her, to protect her, to keep her safe. I never wanted her to be burdened by the weight of what she was meant to carry. But now the truth cannot be hidden any longer. The curse, Elara, it's not just about me, it's about you." Elara's eyes widened as she took a step back, fear creeping into her veins. "Me? What do you mean, it's about me?" Kael sighed deeply, a sound filled with centuries of sorrow. "You are the one who can break this curse. You, Elara, have inherited your mother's abilities. The power that runs through her veins runs through yours as well. It is a power that has been hidden, suppressed, for fear that it would awaken too soon. But now, with the blood moon rising once again, everything is changing. The curse can only be broken by a union between our bloodlines, a union that was never meant to happen until now." Elara stood in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in slowly, She had never imagined her life could be so intricately connected to a bloodline so ancient, so powerful, and yet, here she was, standing before the very king whose curse she could undo. "But why me?" she whispered. "Why would my mom never tell me about this? Why did she keep it all from me?" Kael shook his head, his expression filled with sorrow. "Because she wanted to protect you, Elara. She thought it would be safer for you to grow up without knowing the truth, without the burden of the blood moon seal. But the truth always finds its way out, and now you must decide. Will you accept your destiny, or will you turn your back on it?" Elara stood there, frozen in place as the weight of Kael's words pressed down on her shoulders. She was caught between two worlds, the mortal world she had always known, and the immortal world that had always been hidden from her. The king's curse, her mother's secret, and the bond that tied them all together. Everything was changing. As the full moon rose higher in the night sky, Elara realized that her life would never be the same. The choice was hers, and the consequences of that choice would shape the future of both the mortal and immortal realms forever. But one thing was certain. The mystery of her mother's bloodline and the curse that had bound them all was only beginning to unravel. The flickering light from the torches lining the walls cast shadows that seemed to dance across the cold stone floor of the chamber. Elara stood in the center of the room, her eyes fixed on Kael as the silence stretched between them. The weight of his words still hung in the air. Her mother, Evelyn, had been a part of Kael's life. Not just a passing acquaintance, but something deeper, something tied to fate and ancient promises. Elara's heart raced as she tried to make sense of it all. Everything she thought she knew about her mother, about herself, had just shattered. She had always seen her mother as an ordinary woman, a servant in the royal court, someone who had given Elara a simple life, filled with love and care. But now, standing in front of this immortal king, she was being told her mother was far more than just a maid. She was a key figure in a story that spanned centuries. "You don't understand." Kael's voice was soft but firm, breaking through her spiraling thoughts. "Your mother never wanted you to know. She kept you safe, kept you away from the past for your own protection." "But why?" Elara's voice trembled as she took a step closer to him, the questions that had been gnawing at her finally bursting to the surface. "How did she end up in the castle? Why did she never mention you? Was she hiding from you?" Kael's gaze darkened as he looked down at her, his expression faltering for a brief moment as if the weight of the past had suddenly overwhelmed him. He looked away, his hands resting on the back of the chair he had been leaning against, his knuckles white from the tension. "She wasn't hiding," Kael said slowly, almost as if he was speaking to himself. "She was running." He turned back to Elara, his ember-colored eyes filled with sorrow. "But she was also running towards something. Toward me." Elara's confusion deepened. "I don't understand. My mother, was she in love with you? Was that why she left everything behind? Why did she disappear without saying anything to me?" Kael inhaled sharply, as though the memories were too painful to revisit. His face hardened, but there was a flicker of something softer beneath his stoic expression. "It was never that simple. Love, fate, duty, they all intertwine in ways that you can't begin to comprehend. Your mother was a part of something ancient, something she didn't even fully understand. She was a woman torn between her bloodline, her duty, and the world she wanted to escape." Elara felt a chill creep up her spine. She stepped closer, wanting to understand, to grasp the truth behind the cryptic words that Kael had spoken. She had to know who her mother really was, why she had been so secretive, why she had kept the truth hidden from Elara for all these years. "Tell me what happened. I need to know," Elara whispered, her voice filled with urgency. "Tell me about the night you met her. Tell me what you promised her." Kael's face softened at her request, and for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his cold features. He looked away, as if searching for the right words, the ones that would explain everything. After a long pause, he began to speak, his voice low and steady, as though he were recounting a tale from a distant past. "I met Evelyn on the night of the full moon," he said. "I had already been cursed by the blood moon, trapped in my wolf form for centuries. I had spent so many years alone, burdened by this curse, that I had almost forgotten what it was like to be human. But then, I met her." His voice broke just slightly. Evelyn was different from anyone I had ever met. She was wild, free-spirited, and fearless. She didn't see me as a monster, but as a man, someone who deserved to be loved. She didn't run when I transformed, as most mortals would. She stayed with me, even when I was a beast. Elara's heart ached at the tenderness in Kael's voice. The way he spoke about her mother was filled with reverence, as though Evelyn had been his salvation. "I promised her that I would protect her," Kael continued, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "But the world we lived in was not kind. The rebellion, the war between the old kingdom and the immortals, tore us apart. She was taken from me before I could fulfill that promise. I never saw her again, not until now." Elara's mind raced as she processed the enormity of what Kael was saying. Her mother, a woman who had always seemed so ordinary, had once been a part of a world of immortals, a world of power and curses. She had been a part of Kael's life, a connection forged in a moment of destiny. But something had torn them apart, something so powerful that it had erased not just their love, but also their memories. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did she keep this from me? Why didn't she say anything about you or this curse?" Kael's face hardened again, his jaw clenching as if the question itself caused him physical pain. He crossed his arms over his chest, his posture rigid. "She didn't tell you because she wanted to protect you," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "She was afraid that if you knew, you would be dragged into a war you weren't ready for. The curse, the prophecy, it all revolves around you now, Elara." Her breath hitched at the words. "What do you mean? What prophecy? What war?" Kael took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with the gravity of centuries of secrets. "The prophecy speaks of a child born of royal blood and mortal humility. A child who would awaken the blood moon throne and break the curse that binds my family to the wolf. That child is you, Elara. You are the key to ending my curse, to uniting the mortal world with the immortal world." Elara's knees almost gave way beneath her as the weight of Kael's words sank in. Her entire life, everything she had ever known, was suddenly connected to a prophecy, to a curse, to a battle that stretched across time and worlds. She was the key. She was the one who could break the curse that had kept Kael trapped in his wolf form for centuries. But how? How could she, a simple maid's daughter, be the one to end this curse? "I don't understand," Elara whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know anything about magic, about curses, about prophecies. How am I supposed to fix this?" Kael took a step closer, his eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it nearly consumed him. "You are more powerful than you know, Elara. Your mother's bloodline, the bloodline she passed to you, is the key to everything, but you have to learn to control it, to embrace it. You are the child of the blood moon, and only you can end this curse." Elara felt the world shift beneath her feet, as though the ground itself was crumbling away, leaving her to float in the unknown. She was the child of the blood moon. She didn't feel any different. She was just a girl who had spent her life in the shadows of the castle, never knowing the truth about her heritage. But now, standing in this chamber, facing Kael, she could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on her. And yet, she didn't feel ready. She didn't feel strong enough to face whatever was coming next. Kael's gaze softened, as though he could sense her fear. "You're not alone in this, Elara. I'll help you. I'll guide you through this, just as I promised your mother all those years ago. Together, we will break this curse." Elara didn't know what to say. She wanted to believe him, to trust in the promise that had kept Kael alive for centuries. But the truth was, she was terrified. Terrified of the power that was awakening inside her. Terrified of the prophecy that tied her to a world of immortals, of blood and darkness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as she turned to face the vast, shadowed hall. "But I don't know if I can do this." Kael's voice was steady, his presence comforting as he spoke the words she needed to hear. "You already have the strength, Elara. You just have to find it." As Elara looked out into the dimly lit chamber, the weight of her destiny felt more real than ever. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and unknowns. But for the first time in her life, Elara knew she wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. She was the key to something much greater than herself, and she would have to rise to meet it, or everything she knew would be lost forever. The moon hung high, its silvery light cascading through the arched windows, bathing the stone walls of the chamber in a soft, ethereal glow. Elara stood at the window, her eyes fixed on the full moon. It was the same moon that had marked her destiny, the same moon that had tied her to Kael in ways she couldn't fully understand. The moonlight, as bright and cold as it was, seemed to pulse with an energy all its own, reminding her of the strange powers awakening inside her. "Are you ready?" Kael's voice broke the silence, soft yet tinged with something unreadable. Elara turned to face him. He stood at the far end of the room, his posture poised, his gaze distant and heavy. Tonight was the night he transformed. Tonight, she would witness the curse that had held him captive for centuries. "I'm not sure what I'm ready for," she replied, her voice a whisper, a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "But I'll try to understand." Kael nodded, as if he had expected her answer. The weight of his past, the burden of the curse that had bound him for so long, was something he couldn't hide, no matter how much he tried. Elara could see it in the lines of his face, the way his shoulders stiffened, the way his eyes darkened as he prepared for what was to come. "The blood moon seal is tied to more than just your mother's heritage, Elara," Kael said, his voice steady but heavy with years of hidden truths. "It is tied to you, to the powers you have yet to fully awaken. You are the key, but you will need to learn how to control what has been dormant for so long." Elara frowned, her mind racing with questions. "What kind of powers? I don't feel any different." "You will," Kael said, his voice quiet yet certain. "The powers are inside you, waiting for the right moment. When you accept your connection to this world, to the blood moon seal, they will rise." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. She had always thought of herself as just a simple maid's daughter, someone with no real place in the grand scheme of things. But now, standing in this room, the reality of her new life was beginning to sink in. She was tied to something far greater, something that was slowly unfolding within her. Before she could ask more questions, Kael turned away, his attention drawn to the shadows deepening in the corners of the room. The time had come. "Stay back," Kael warned, his voice sharp. "This is not something for you to witness lightly. The transformation is not just painful, it is dangerous." Elara nodded, but something in her, something deep inside her, refused to step away. She had come this far, had learned so much already. She couldn't turn back now. She needed to understand, to see what Kael had been hiding, to understand the price he had paid for his immortality. Kael took a step toward the center of the room. His eyes closed briefly, his chest rising and falling with a deep breath. When his eyes opened again, they were filled with a sorrow that reached deep into Elara's soul. She had seen Kael as a king, powerful, untouchable, distant. But now, in this moment, he looked fragile, vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected. The rawness in his eyes spoke of centuries of isolation, of pain that had never been shared, never been understood. A low growl rumbled from deep within his chest, and Elara felt the air shift. The room seemed to thrum with energy, a vibration she could feel deep in her bones. Kael's body began to tremble, his muscles contorting as the transformation began. At first, it was subtle. His skin paled even further, the veins beneath his skin becoming more pronounced. His clothes, once regal and dark, seemed to strain against the growing tension in his body. Elara watched in awe and horror as Kael's form began to change. His bones cracked, his spine arched in unnatural ways, his fingers lengthening and contorting into claws. A growl escaped his throat, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the chamber. Elara took a step back, instinctively moving away from the terrifying display before her. But her gaze never wavered. She couldn't look away, even as her heart pounded in her chest, even as fear tightened its grip around her. The transformation continued. His once human features twisted, elongating into a face that was half man, half wolf. His eyes glowed a fierce, ember-like red, burning with a ferocity that spoke of ancient power and untold suffering. His teeth grew sharp, his jaw extending into a terrifying snarl as his body expanded, muscles bulging beneath the dark fur that began to coat his skin. Elara stepped closer, mesmerized by the creature before her, torn between fear and fascination. Kael, the Wolf King, was no longer the regal king she had once seen from a distance. He was a beast, a primal force of nature. "Kael," Elara whispered, her voice trembling. The wolf, no longer the man she had spoken to, lifted its head and let out a bone-chilling howl. The sound reverberated through the castle as though it was a cry of anguish, of centuries of torment, and then, as suddenly as it had started, the transformation began to reverse. Kael's body shifted again, bones snapping back into place. The fur retracting as his form shrank and twisted, returning to the man he had once been. The red glow in his eyes faded, leaving only the pale, haunted gaze she had come to know. When the transformation was complete, Kael stood before her, breathless, his body shaking with the effort of what he had just endured. His face was twisted in pain, and for a moment Elara saw him for what he truly was, a man trapped by his own curse, a king bound to a fate he couldn't escape. He collapsed to his knees, his head bowed in exhaustion, his breath came in ragged gasps, and Elara could see the toll it had taken on him. She took a step forward, her own heart racing as she moved to kneel beside him. "Kael," she began, her voice gentle but filled with compassion. "I don't understand. Why do you go through this every month? Why can't you break the curse?" Kael lifted his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "The curse is my punishment," he said, his voice hoarse. "A punishment for a pact I made long ago, a pact with forces I can't undo. Every full moon I become a beast, a creature of rage and power, and I am forced to relive the pain, the isolation of my past. The curse is my burden to bear, Elara. And now," he paused, his eyes darkening with a new intensity. "Now, you are the only one who can end it." Elara was silent for a long time, absorbing the weight of his words. She could feel the depth of his pain, his loneliness, and for the first time, she saw him not as a king, not as a creature of legend, but as a man, broken, lost, and desperately seeking a way out. Her heart swelled with sympathy, and yet there was fear there too, fear of the power inside her, of the prophecy that had marked her as the key to ending Kael's suffering. The weight of it all threatened to crush her, but Kael's words echoed in her mind, urging her to understand. She could end this, she could break the curse, but at what cost? She reached out to him, her fingers trembling as she touched his shoulder. "I'll help you," she said softly. "I don't know how, but I'll help you." Kael looked at her, his gaze intense, filled with gratitude and something deeper, something Elara couldn't name. "Thank you," he whispered. "That means more than you know." As the night grew deeper, Elara stayed by his side, watching as the full moon slowly retreated from the sky. The castle was still, its ancient stones echoing with secrets long buried. And as the night drew to a close, Elara knew that her journey had only just begun. She had seen the beast Kael was forced to become, and she knew now that she had a choice to make. A choice that would change the course of their lives forever. And, somehow, Elara knew she wasn't just meant to help him. She was meant to save them both. The light of the moon bathed the castle in an eerie glow, casting long shadows across the hallways as Elara walked silently beside Kael. Her mind was still spinning from everything she had learned. Her powers, her bloodline, and the weight of the curse that had bound Kael for centuries. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore, but she knew one thing: her life had changed forever, and there was no turning back. They stopped before a large door at the end of a dimly lit corridor. Kael placed his hand on the cold metal, hesitating for just a moment. Elara could feel the tension radiating from him, his normally composed demeanor cracked by something deeper, a worry, perhaps, that had been hidden for so long. "This is it," Kael said quietly, pushing the door open with a groan. "Come inside. There's much more you need to know." The room they entered was large, its walls lined with ancient bookshelves and strange artifacts. At the center, there was a table draped in dark velvet, a single candle flickering in the center. Kael moved toward the table and gestured for Elara to sit. His eyes were somber, and for the first time, Elara saw a vulnerability in him that she had never noticed before. "You must understand, Elara," Kael began, his voice low. "The prophecy that binds you to this world, to me, is not just about breaking my curse. It's about the fate of both the mortal and immortal realms. Your powers, as unawakened as they may be now, are the key to changing the course of our destinies." Elara sat down, her mind racing with questions. "I don't understand. What does my power have to do with saving the worlds? And why me? Why wasn't my mother part of this?" Kael's gaze softened, and he sighed. "Because your mother was the one who first set this in motion. She didn't know it at the time, but she was the one who was meant to give birth to the one who would end this curse. You, Elara, are the child of an ancient prophecy, one that was hidden for centuries, protected from those who would use it for their own gain." He paused, his eyes shifting as if weighing something heavy. "You're not just a daughter of the bloodline of the first kings, Elara. Your mother was part of something far older than I ever imagined." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't understand how all of this could be true. Her mother, Evelyn, had always been so humble, so quiet. She had never mentioned anything about magic or the royal bloodline. "What do you mean?" Elara asked, her voice shaking with confusion and disbelief. "How could she have been part of something so powerful and never told me? How could she keep this from me?" Kael's expression darkened as he glanced toward the far corner of the room where an ornate mirror hung on the wall. "Your mother was part of an ancient order of magical women, Elara. Women who had the power to break curses, to alter the fate of kings, to heal the very land itself. They were known as the Keepers of the Veil. They guarded the balance between the mortal and immortal realms, ensuring that neither world could overpower the other." Elara listened, her heart beating faster as she tried to digest the information. "The Keepers of the Veil? My mother was one of them?" She could barely comprehend the words. The life she had known, the life that seemed so simple, now felt like a lie. Kael nodded slowly. "Yes. Your mother's involvement with the Order was secret, even from me. She had powers, abilities that she suppressed, not understanding their true significance. But when she became pregnant with you, everything changed. The prophecy had spoken of a child born of both royal blood and mortal humility, a child who would be the bridge between the two worlds." Elara's mind was spinning, trying to piece together the truth. "And my mother, she knew this?" Kael's eyes darkened with sadness. "She never knew the full extent of what was happening. She was never meant to. The Council of Immortals, the very ones who rule this world, feared the prophecy. They feared that a child like you would come, someone who could break the curse and undo everything they had worked for. A shiver ran down Elara's spine as the pieces began to fall into place. So, they hid it from her? They erased her memory? Kael nodded grimly. Yes. They took her memories, Elara. They made her forget everything. Her identity, her true heritage, even her connection to me. They hoped she would live out her life as a servant, never knowing what she was truly meant to be. Elara's thoughts raced. She had always known there was something different about her mother. Evelyn had been quiet, always avoiding questions about her past, and had kept her life before the castle a mystery. But to learn that it was all because of something so much larger than either of them, something that threatened not just her family, but the very balance of the world, was overwhelming. Before she could ask more, the door creaked open and a figure stepped into the room, interrupting their conversation. Elara looked up in surprise, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the woman standing before them. The woman was old, her face lined with age, her eyes cloudy but sharp. She wore a long, flowing robe of deep purple, embroidered with strange runes that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Her presence filled the room with an undeniable weight of knowledge, a quiet power that Elara couldn't ignore. "Kael," the woman said in a voice that seemed to echo from far beyond the room, "I have come to speak of the prophecy." Kael stood and bowed respectfully, his eyes narrowing as if he already knew what was coming. "I know, Orlin, but she must understand. The prophecy is not just about the curse, it's about Elara." Orlin, the seer, nodded, her gaze moving to Elara, with a depth of understanding that made the hairs on Elara's neck stand on end. "Yes, child," she said softly. "You are the one who will change the course of both realms. Your powers will awaken in time, but first you must understand the truth of your mother's past. It was she who carried the key to the curse, and now it is you who must use that key to unlock what has been hidden." Elara's heart raced. "What do you mean? What am I supposed to do?" Orlin's eyes glinted with ancient wisdom. "The Council of Immortals fears you, Elara. They know that your powers will bring balance, but they will not allow it willingly. They will stop at nothing to keep the prophecy from coming true." A cold shiver passed through Elara, and she glanced toward Kael, who was standing quietly beside her. His face was hard, but his eyes showed something different. Fear, yes, but also a deep, unwavering resolve. "The Council of Immortals cannot be allowed to stop this," Kael said firmly. "They are afraid of the power you will wield, Elara. Afraid of what you are capable of. But you must know this. You are the key. You are the one who can break the curse, not just for me, but for the future of both realms." The seer, Orlin, stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It is written that when the child of royal blood and mortal humility awakens, the blood moon curse will break, and the realms will be reunited. But the Council will do everything in their power to prevent it." Elara's hands clenched into fists as she tried to understand the weight of Orlin's words. The prophecy, her mother's past, and her own future were all tangled together, forming a web that she couldn't quite untangle. But one thing was clear. She was no longer a bystander in this world. She was part of something far greater than herself, and whether she was ready or not, her role in this prophecy would shape the future of both the mortal and immortal realms. Kael's voice brought her back from her thoughts. "There is no turning back now, Elara. You are the only one who can end this, but first, you must come to terms with your powers and the role you are meant to play." Elara nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on Kael. "I will do whatever it takes." The prophecy had been set in motion, and now, with the Council watching, the battle for both realms was about to begin. The tension in Kael's mansion hung thick in the air, like an impending storm that no one could escape. Every step Elara took across the cold marble floors of the castle seemed to echo louder than it should. The once serene halls now felt oppressive, weighed down by an uncertainty she couldn't shake. As she moved toward the grand hall, her thoughts churned. Kael had just told her the truth about her powers, about the prophecy. It was all too much to digest, too much for one person to hold. The council's warning still rang in her ears. Elara was the key to breaking the curse, but she was also the key to a war. The prophecy had set her on a path that could shatter the fragile peace between the mortal world and the immortal realm. And now, with the full moon looming ever closer, Elara felt the weight of the prophecy bearing down on her. She pushed open the large oak doors to the hall, her gaze immediately locking with Kael's. His face was more solemn than usual, his gaze bore away, as though his mind was consumed by something he couldn't yet put into words. "Elara," Kael said softly, his voice heavy with concern. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. There is something I must tell you." Elara did as he asked, but she couldn't shake the unease that settled deep in her chest. Kael's presence, usually so reassuring, felt colder now. There was a heaviness in the air that she couldn't ignore. Her mind raced as she waited for him to speak. "They are coming," Kael finally said, his voice low and strained. "Who?" Elara asked, her heart quickening. "The council," Kael replied, his eyes darkening. "They've sent emissaries. They're demanding that you be handed over to them. They want to prevent the prophecy from coming to fruition, and they will stop at nothing to do so." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that the council held immense power, but hearing Kael speak of their threats so directly made the reality of the situation all the more terrifying. "They won't stop, Elara. Not until they have you." Kael's words were grim, but there was a fierce fire in his eyes. "They believe that your existence threatens their rule, that if the prophecy comes true, it will undo centuries of power they've built." Elara's hands clenched into fists in her lap. "But why me? Why is the prophecy so dangerous to them?" "Because you're the key to breaking the curse," Kael explained. "Your bloodline, your powers, everything about you ties the mortal world to the immortal realm. Your birth was foretold as the one thing that could unravel everything the immortals have worked for." Elara tried to process this, but the weight of it all felt suffocating. "And what does that mean for me? What am I supposed to do?" Kael's gaze softened, but his resolve remained unyielding. "It means you must choose, Elara. You must decide if you will embrace the prophecy and all that it entails, or if you will turn your back on it, rejecting everything that has been set in motion." "But I don't understand." Elara stood up, her voice rising with frustration. "How am I supposed to make this decision? I don't know what's right. I don't know if I should embrace this prophecy, if I should fight for a future where I have a place in either world, or if I should let it all go." Kael stood, his expression intense. "I don't want to see you hurt, Elara. I don't want to see you become a pawn in a game you didn't choose to play. But there is no escaping this. The council won't stop until they have you, and we'll both be trapped in their scheme, whether you accept the prophecy or not." Elara felt her chest tighten. She couldn't breathe. "But why does it have to be me? Why was I born into this curse? I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I want to. I just want to live a normal life. I just want my mother back, to have her whole again." "Your mother is a part of this," Kael said softly, his voice filled with sorrow. "I know that you've been taught to fear your destiny, but it's a part of who you are, Elara. It's a part of her, too." The words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, Elara felt the full weight of the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders. Her mother, Evelyn, had always been the quiet, unassuming maid, keeping her head down in the shadows. She had never spoken of the life she had before coming to the castle, before she had Elara. Now Elara realized the past that had been hidden from her for so long was catching up to them both. "I don't know what to do, Kael," Elara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what I'm supposed to choose." Kael moved closer, his eyes softening as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone in this, Elara. No matter what you choose, I will be here. I will protect you. I will fight for you, and I will never let you face this alone." His words, his promise, sent a warmth through her, but it was not enough to quell the uncertainty gnawing at her. How could she choose? The prophecy loomed over her, the weight of her heritage, the expectations, all of it pressing in on her from every side. And the council was closing in. As if to emphasize this, the loud echoing sound of approaching footsteps reached her ears, and Kael tensed beside her. "They've arrived," he said, his voice grim. "The emissaries of the council. It's time." Elara turned toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the sound of voices approaching the mansion's grand entrance, the shuffle of boots against the stone floor. This was it, the moment that would change everything. "They'll demand you, Elara. They won't accept anything less, but I will not give you up," Kael said firmly, his jaw set in determination. "If they want war, we will give them war." The words echoed in the room, and Elara felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her once more. The prophecy was not just her destiny, it was her responsibility. But would that responsibility cost her everything she had left? Kael's words were a vow, a promise she couldn't ignore, and in the depths of her heart, she realized something. She was no longer just a girl caught in the web of an ancient curse. She was part of something much greater, a force that could change the course of history. Her power, her heritage, and her choices would determine the fate of both the mortal and immortal worlds. And though she wasn't sure which path was the right one, Elara knew one thing for certain. This was her fight now. The dim light of the morning filtered through the heavy drapes of the mansion, casting long, slanting shadows across the grand hall. Elara sat in silence, her mind heavy with the weight of the revelations from the past days. Every word Kael had spoken, every detail about her mother's secret life, seemed to unlock a door to a world she had never known, one filled with dark magic, ancient prophecies, and an untold history that seemed to have been buried deep within the walls of Voss Castle. Her gaze rested on Kael, who was standing near the tall stone fireplace. His back to her. The flames flickered and danced, casting brief glimmers of light across his sharp, haunted features. His expression was distant, lost in thought, as though the past had wrapped him in chains once more. Elara knew that there was more he hadn't told her yet, more about her mother's role in this tangled fate, and about Kael's own part in the curse that had held him captive for so long. Without turning to face her, Kael spoke softly, his voice low with an emotion Elara couldn't quite place. "Are you ready to see it?" Elara swallowed, the question hanging in the air. She didn't know what it was, but she had learned not to question him. Not anymore. She stood from where she had been sitting near the window, her eyes still clouded with confusion and uncertainty. The truth of her mother's past, of Evelyn's secret role in this immortal world, had been revealed bit by bit, and yet Elara still couldn't wrap her mind around the enormity of it. "Ready for what?" she asked, her voice betraying the fear she couldn't fully suppress. Kael glanced over his shoulder, his amber eyes meeting hers. There was a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. Pain, regret, and perhaps something softer that she wasn't yet ready to understand. He motioned for her to come closer, and though a part of her hesitated, she stepped forward, compelled by a mix of curiosity and the need for answers. "This place," Kael began, his voice carrying the weight of memories he hadn't shared in centuries. "This castle, the grounds, these are where it all began, where your mother and I—" He trailed off, his expression tightening, but he didn't need to finish. Elara could sense the unspoken words, the quiet sorrow in his tone. The moment he said her mother's name, the memories seemed to rise within him, forcing the past to surface like a rising tide. "Follow me," Kael said softly, and with that he turned away from the hearth and led her through the corridors of the mansion. They moved in silence, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors as Kael guided her down paths Elara had never ventured. The mansion was vast, with hidden rooms and forgotten corners she had never seen before. The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the heart of the building, the walls thick with history, their stories told through faded tapestries and old portraits that lined the passageways. Finally, they arrived at a door that Elara had never noticed before. It was made of dark wood, intricately carved with symbols she didn't understand. Kael's hand lingered on the doorknob, his fingers tracing the carvings as though they held 1,000 untold secrets. His eyes closed briefly, as though he was searching for something, perhaps his own peace. When he opened them again, he turned toward her, his gaze soft but burdened. "This is where it all started," Kael murmured, "where everything changed." With a slow, deliberate movement, Kael pushed open the door and Elara stepped inside, her heart racing. The room beyond was unlike any she had ever seen. The walls were lined with shelves of ancient books, their pages yellowed with age, some bound in materials that looked almost otherworldly. The air was thick with the scent of ink and parchment, and the soft light from the nearby window illuminated an old wooden table at the center of the room. On the table was a faded map, the edges frayed and worn. Kael walked to the table, his hand brushing across the map. "This," he said quietly, "was once the home of the Order of the Moon, an ancient group of women with the power to break curses, to alter the fates of kings." Elara's breath caught in her throat. "The Order of the Moon? My mother was part of that?" Kael nodded. "Yes, she was. Evelyn wasn't just a maid, Elara. She was born into a line of powerful women who could wield magic that none in this world fully understood. They were the guardians of the blood moon seal, the symbol that binds the mortal world to the immortal." Elara's mind spun. Her mother, the woman who had raised her in the castle, who had kept to herself, had been part of something so much greater. She had always known there was something more to her mother's life, but this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. "Why didn't she tell me?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. "Why didn't she ever speak of this?" Kael's face softened with a mixture of regret and understanding. "Because when the prophecy was set into motion, the council, those who rule the immortal world, took action. They erased her memories, forced her to live in obscurity, to forget who she truly was. They knew that if she remembered, the curse would break, and the bloodline, the throne would be threatened." Kael's voice was filled with bitterness, his hand clenched tightly around the edge of the map. "They made her forget everything, Elara. They forced her to become a servant here, hiding the truth from both her and you. But the mark, the blood moon seal, it always called to her, and now it's calling to you." The words hit Elara like a storm, her mind swirling with confusion. "But why? Why did she disappear? What happened to her?" Kael's gaze darkened as he turned toward her, his face a mask of pain. "She was taken. The council ordered it. They believed that her existence, the child she would one day bear, was a threat. When the prophecy foretold the rise of the child who would break the curse, they thought they could erase it, but they couldn't. They couldn't stop it. And now, here you are, Elara. You are the key to everything." Elara took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean? What does this mean for me?" Kael's expression was solemn, filled with sorrow. "You are the one who will change everything. You are the one who will end the curse. You are the child of the prophecy, the bridge between the mortal and immortal realms." The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. Elara wanted to scream, to run, to escape from this fate that was unfolding before her. But there was no escaping it, was there? She was part of something that had been set in motion long before she was born. "Your mother was part of this," Kael continued, his voice softening. "She and I, we made a promise, Elara. We were bound together by fate, by the blood moon seal, and when she disappeared, I swore to protect you, I swore to protect the child who would one day be the one to break the curse." "But why me?" Elara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why now? What am I supposed to do?" Kael turned to her, his eyes filled with ancient sorrow. "You have inherited your mother's power. The same magic that binds us both to this curse flows through you. The seal on your palm is the key to everything. When you are ready, Elara, you will awaken the magic that lies dormant inside you. And when that happens, the curse will break." Elara stood there, frozen in place, her mind a blur. How was she supposed to control this power? How was she supposed to accept the role that had been forced upon her? "You don't have to do it alone," Kael said, his voice low and reassuring. "I will be here, always. But the decision is yours. You can choose to embrace your destiny, or you can fight it. Either way, you will be the one who decides the fate of both worlds." As Kael's words echoed in the room, Elara couldn't help but wonder, was she truly ready to take on this burden? Could she fulfill the prophecy and break the curse, or would she fail like her mother had before her? The answers were not clear. But one thing was certain: her life, her mother's life, and the fate of both the mortal and immortal realms rested in her hands. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting its pale, silvery glow over the castle walls. The night was thick with tension, the air heavy with anticipation. Elara stood at the center of the grand hall, her eyes fixed on the towering doors that led to the council chamber. Behind her, Kael lingered in the shadows, his presence a constant, silent support. But tonight, it was Elara who would stand at the forefront. It was her decision now, the weight of centuries, the weight of destiny, pressed against her chest. The council was waiting. The same council that had orchestrated her mother's erasure. The same council that had tried to bury the prophecy, that had imprisoned Kael in a form he could not escape. And now, they were coming for her, for the one who held the key to everything. Elara's heart raced as the guards in the corridor moved to open the doors. She could feel Kael's gaze on her, burning like a steady flame in the darkness. His eyes were filled with pride, but also fear. The fear that the prophecy would claim its toll on her, the fear that the curse would not break without a price. "Elara!" Kael's voice cut through the silence, soft but firm. "Whatever happens, know that I will always stand by you." Her fingers brushed the edge of the blood moon seal on her palm, its faint glow still pulsing with life. This was her moment. This was the time she had waited for, the time when everything would change. No more running, no more questions. It was time to fight. She nodded, turning toward the massive doors as they swung open with a deafening groan. The council's chamber, a cavernous room with high, vaulted ceilings and walls adorned with tapestries of ancient battles and forgotten kings, was bathed in a cold, sterile light. The seats around the table were filled with beings of immense power, vampires and immortals, each of them older and wiser than she could fathom. Their eyes gleamed with centuries of knowledge, but there was something in their gazes now, something unfamiliar. Elara could feel the weight of their stares on her, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't the same girl who had stumbled into Kael's world weeks ago. She was the one who would end this. She was the one who would break the curse. The doors slammed shut behind her, echoing in the stillness of the chamber. The council leader, an ancient vampire with long silver hair and sharp, piercing eyes, rose from his seat. His voice was a low growl, full of authority. "Elara Voss," he began, his gaze sweeping over her. "You have broken the laws of the immortal realm by awakening the blood moon seal. You forced our hand, and now you will surrender to us. The prophecy cannot come true. It must not." Elara's gaze locked onto his, and she took a step forward. Her hand trembled slightly, but only from the power coursing through her veins, the power she had only just begun to understand. "I will not surrender," she said, her voice steady and strong, betraying no hint of the fear that churned within her. "I am the child of the prophecy. The blood moon seal is mine, and I will use it to free Kael. You will not stop me." The room grew deathly quiet. The council members exchanged glances, their eyes narrowing with growing suspicion. "You think you can defy us?" the council leader sneered. "You are nothing but a child, Elara. You do not understand the forces you are dealing with." Elara's fingers curled into a fist, the mark on her palm flaring brighter with each word he spoke. She could feel the ancient magic that had been dormant for so long awakening inside her, pulling, beckoning. It was time. "I understand more than you think," Elara said, her voice low, filled with the certainty of someone who had come into their power. "I understand that you tried to erase my mother, tried to hide the truth from me. You failed. And now I will finish what she started." A murmur ran through the council, a ripple of unease spreading among them. They knew, as Elara did, that they were running out of time. "Enough of this," the council leader hissed, his eyes glowing with a dangerous red light. "You are not the one who decides the fate of our world, Elara. We are the council. We are the rulers. You will bow to us." The air in the chamber shifted, darkening, as the council members began to rise from their seats. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening as they prepared to unleash their power. Elara could feel it, the surge of magic building around her, but she did not falter. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The power was hers to control now. The prophecy had already begun. "Elara," Kael's voice broke through her thoughts. "Do not fight them alone. I will stand beside you." His words were a quiet plea, but Elara's heart twisted with the weight of his devotion. She knew that he had carried this curse for centuries, that he had suffered alone. But now, the time had come for both of them to break free. "Stay back," she whispered, shaking her head. "This is something I must do." Kael's eyes met hers, filled with silent understanding. He nodded once, stepping back into the shadows as she took her place at the center of the room, facing the council. The council leader raised his hands, summoning the dark forces that had long bound them. Shadows twisted and coiled in the air, forming into tendrils of dark magic that shot toward Elara. The room seemed to vibrate with the force of their power, but Elara stood firm, her blood moon seal burning bright against the oppressive darkness. "You want to stop me?" Elara's voice rang out, clear and defiant. "You will have to kill me first." The magic of the council surged toward her, but Elara was ready. She extended her hand, and the blood moon seal flared, sending a wave of energy through the room. The shadows recoiled, burning away like mist in the sunlight, and the air crackled with the force of her newfound power. The council gasped in shock. "You cannot control this power," the council leader spat, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "It will consume you." "No," Elara said, her voice steady. "It will not consume me. It will free me." With a sharp gesture, Elara unleashed the full force of the magic within her. The room trembled as her powers surged outward, crashing against the council's dark magic. The walls of the chamber groaned, and the ground beneath them cracked, sending echoes of destruction through the castle. The blood moon seal on her palm burned brighter than it had ever been before, filling the room with a blinding light. The council leader staggered backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. He raised his hand to block the oncoming wave of power, but it was too late. The magic of the blood moon, of the ancient prophecy, swirled around Elara, and with a final deafening pulse, it shattered the curse that had bound Kael for centuries. The council's power faltered, their magic splintering like glass. The oppressive energy in the room collapsed, and silence descended, broken only by the heavy breathing of the remaining council members. Elara stood in the center of the room, her hand still glowing with the power she had unleashed. Her body trembled from the exertion, but she did not fall. She had done it. She had broken the curse. Kael emerged from the shadows, his eyes fixed on her, a mixture of awe and something softer in his gaze. He took a step toward her, his expression filled with wonder. "Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done it. You've broken the curse." Elara nodded, a sense of peace settling over her, even as her heart ached with the weight of the choice she had yet to make. "Now," Kael said softly, his voice tinged with sorrow, "there is one last choice you must make. You must choose your path. Will you remain in the mortal world, or will you join me in the immortal realm?" Elara's heart stilled, the weight of her decision pressing down on her once more. The world around her seemed to fade as she stood at the crossroads of destiny, her power, her heritage, and her future hanging in the balance. The choice was hers to make. And whatever path she chose, her journey had only just begun. The night was still, the echoes of battle and bloodshed fading as the castle settled into an uneasy silence. Elara stood at the edge of the grand balcony overlooking the darkened lands below, her fingers lightly tracing the cool stone. The moon, full and radiant, hung low in the sky, casting its glow across the distant horizon, painting the world in shades of silver and blue. For a moment, she allowed herself to be lost in the tranquility of the night. It had been hours since the council's defeat, hours since the curse that had bound Kael for centuries had been shattered, but the weight of her decision still pressed heavily on her shoulders. Kael was free. The monstrous wolf that had tormented him every full moon was gone, banished forever by the power she had unleashed. He had finally been released from the curse that had chained him to his past, and yet, even as she stood beside him in the aftermath, her heart was not entirely at peace. Kael had asked her to choose. Would she stay in the mortal world, where she had known only fear, loss, and pain? Or would she join him in the immortal realm, where uncertainty could be left behind and the chance to build something new awaited her? The thought was overwhelming. How could she decide? The mortal world had been her home, her life. Despite the suffering, despite the fear, it was where she had known love, especially from her mother. It was the place where she had learned to fight, to survive, to shape her own fate. The mortal world was all she had ever known. But now, there was Kael, her protector, her confidant, the one who had freed her from the prophecies' chains. He had shown her a world beyond what she had imagined, one filled with possibilities, a life without fear of curses or shadowed futures. He was offering her a chance to be free, truly free, in a realm where immortality was no longer a curse but a gift. Her thoughts swirled, racing through the labyrinth of her heart. She was caught between two worlds, neither of which felt entirely hers. She was no longer the frightened girl who had wandered into Kael's world, a mere pawn in a larger game. She was a force, a powerful, unstoppable force that had changed the fate of both worlds. But where did she truly belong? A soft, familiar voice broke through her reverie. "Elara?" Kael stepped quietly into the balcony's threshold, his presence warm and steady, like the pull of the moon itself. His eyes, once filled with the shadows of the curse, now shone with clarity, though there was still an air of sadness about him. He was free. She had done that for him. "I'm here," she said softly, not turning to face him just yet. "I'm thinking." "You've done enough of that," he said, his voice light, though there was an edge of concern beneath it. "You've fought, and you've won, but now, it's time to decide." "I don't know what to choose, Kael," she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes met his, and she saw the same uncertainty reflected in his gaze. He had fought for his freedom, but now he too was uncertain. "What if I can't choose? What if I'm not meant for either world?" Kael stepped closer, his presence like an anchor in the storm of her emotions. "You've never been one for easy choices," he said gently. "But one thing is certain. You've proven you can change the course of destiny. That's not something anyone can do. The mortal world is your home. But you, Elara, you are not just bound to it. You are part of something greater." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "But how can I leave my world behind? My mother? My life?" Your mother is here, Elara, Kael said quietly, his voice tender. And she's not the only one who has been waiting for you. You've always been part of this world, but you are also part of the immortal realm now. You don't have to choose between one or the other, but you must find your place within both. His words were like a key unlocking a door in her heart. She had always been torn between the two worlds. The mortal world had been her reality, her foundation. But now, standing before Kael, she realized that her true purpose was to bridge the two realms, to unite them, to ensure their survival. She was the catalyst for change, the one who could bring balance to both worlds. Before she could speak again, another presence entered the balcony, a familiar, comforting presence. Elara turned to find her mother, Evelyn, standing in the doorway. The years of servitude, the life she had led in the shadows of the castle, were gone. In their place stood a woman who had been reborn, a woman whose memories had returned, and with them a new sense of purpose. "Evelyn," Kael said, his voice soft but filled with reverence. He stepped back to give her space as she approached her daughter. "Elara," Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. She reached for her daughter's hands, her gaze warm but knowing. "You've done it. You've broken the curse. You've freed Kael." Elara's eyes searched her mother's face, looking for the woman who had once been lost to her, the woman who had forgotten her past, who had hidden in plain sight. And now she could see it, the strength, the determination, the memories flooding back. Her mother had always been more than just a maid. She had been part of something far greater. "I never thought this day would come," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling as she reached out to touch Elara's cheek. "But you did it, my daughter. You freed us both." The weight of her mother's words settled on Elara like a heavy cloak. She had fought for her mother's freedom, for Kael's, and now she had to fight for herself, for the future she wanted to create. She was no longer just a girl caught between two worlds. She was a woman who had the power to reshape them both. Elara stepped forward, wrapping her arms around her mother, the two of them holding each other tightly. "I don't know what to do next, Mom," Elara said, her voice muffled in her mother's shoulder. "I don't know where I belong anymore." "You belong with us, Elara," Evelyn said softly. "You belong with the world you fought to protect. You've always been destined for greatness, my love. And now, you must choose your path, one that will shape the future of both worlds." Kael stepped forward again, his presence steady behind them. He placed a hand gently on Elara's shoulder, his touch warm and comforting. "We will face this together, Elara. The decision is yours. But know this, you will never have to choose between the two worlds. You can have both. You will lead them." Elara looked between her mother and Kael, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't known she could feel. She had fought for freedom, for truth, for justice. But now she realized that her battle had never been just about one world. It had always been about both. The mortal world, her home, and the immortal realm, where Kael and Evelyn's destinies had been intertwined with hers. The weight of the decision still hung in the air, but Elara now understood that her path would not be defined by fear or uncertainty. It would be defined by the choices she made. Choices that could reshape not only her future, but the future of both the mortal and immortal realms. "I've been so afraid," Elara whispered, her voice trembling as she looked up at Kael and her mother. "Afraid of what might happen if I choose wrong, but I can't live in fear anymore. I've seen what I'm capable of. I've seen what we can do together, and I won't let the past define me anymore." Her words were a declaration, a promise to herself and to the world she was about to change. The future was uncertain, but she would no longer shy away from it. With a deep breath, Elara turned to face Kael. "I choose to walk this path with you," she said, her voice steady, filled with determination. "Together, we will lead both worlds, and we will create a future where neither one has to fear the other." Kael's eyes softened, Filled with pride and something deeper, something unspoken, he reached out, his hand slipping into hers. Together, he agreed, his voice barely a whisper. And as they stood there, united by their choices, the first rays of dawn began to break over the horizon. The darkness of the night lifted, replaced by the promise of a new day, a new dawn where love, power, and fate would no longer be bound by curses or prophecies. It was a new beginning, one they would shape together, and nothing would stand in their way.